stone.
Hey there, I'm Kix Patterson with the Daily Memphian. This week on the sidebar, we decided to publish an episode of Sound Bites. This episode was recorded in August and has Jennifer Chandler and Ben Smith, owner of Tsunami, talking about how restaurants price your favorite meals. We hope you enjoy this episode and subscribe to Sound Bites and all of the Daily Memphian podcasts wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Sound Bites. I'm your host, Jennifer Chandler, and I'm speaking today with Ben Smith, the chef and owner of Tsunami Restaurant in Cooper Young, and we're going to talk about all the factors impacting the price of a dish. But first, let me remind you, you are tuning into Sound Bites. Sound Bites is the Daily Memphian's weekly food, drink, and dining podcast. You can tune in on WYXR Radio every Thursday at 11 a.m. or listen wherever you get your podcast, iTunes or Spotify, or listen at dailymemphian.com. Last week, Kat Gordon of Muddy's Bake Shop was my guest, and we talked all about a fun new event series you can be part of. Head to dailymemphian.com/food for all the details and the latest Memphis food news. If you are listening on WYXR, up next you can listen to Sidebar with Eric Barnes. This week he's talking about the Mighty Roots Music Festival. But let's get started talking about restaurants and menu prices. Ben Smith, thank you for being a guest on Sound Bites to talk about a topic that impacts every single restaurant and every restaurant patron.
Thanks, Jennifer. Happy to be here.
I hear a lot of people talking about how everything costs more these days, especially dining out.
Yes.
So, as a restaurant patron myself, I've noticed that the menu prices are kind of eking up over the past couple of years, to put it mildly. And I thought that I would like to know kind of what goes into the price of a dish. And I thought everyone listening would like to hear about that too. My first question for you is, you always hear about how restaurants run on really slim margins. You know, it's really not, a restaurant is a labor of love. It's not going to, what's the joke is, that if you want to make it $1 million, you start with $2 million and you open a restaurant.
Right.
So really, how slim a margin do most independently owned restaurants run on?
Single digits. It's like 6, 7, 8%, even that low. If you can break double digit bottom line, 10%, 12%, you're doing pretty good. Sure, other restaurants do much better, but high-end restaurants that are dealing with expensive products, white tablecloth restaurants, margins are slim under the best of circumstances. Right. And right now aren't the best of circumstances.
It's been a hard 4 years.
It's been a challenging 4 years, to say the least. So those margins, the old margins, are out the window now.
Yeah, and I think that's something that for people to understand is that, when you look at a restaurant and when you walk in a restaurant and it looks like it's full, and then you kind of go to yourself, I think we've said this before, that people walk in and they come up to you and say, oh gosh, you survived the pandemic, you're doing great. It's still not great right now, is it?
Not really. I think people come in a lot and see a full dining room on a busy night, and they do the math and in their heads and think, oh, well, this place is doing pretty good, based on my check and this room full of people, they've made it. It's and people do say, hey, you're doing great. I'm glad you made it through COVID and things are back to normal. And there is no normal anymore. There's no back to normal. I don't think we're ever going to get back to anything even remotely close to normal.
Well, that's kind of some sobering news. But I do think it's important for people to realize that because, when we go back to being, these independently owned restaurants like yours that's, run by, an independent person or a family, and they're pouring their life and their love into it. How many years has Tsunami been open? It's been a while. 26
years this month.
26 years.
Yep.
That's a very, very long time. That means you have committed the large portion of your life to this one restaurant.
Yes. My sous chef of 21 years, who left me in July, used to say, I've been here longer than I haven't been here. meaning he spent more than half his life working at Tsunami. And that always struck me as pretty profound. But yeah, 26 years, that's the longest job I've ever had. And it's,
I've never been anywhere 26 years. That's I don't think most people listening have been somewhere 26 years. I think that's a real rarity.
Yeah, I'm a real dinosaur in the restaurant world.
I wouldn't say that. And for those listening, if you have not been to Tsunami Restaurant, Tsunami's restaurant is located in Cooper Young on Cooper Street. It was one of the first restaurants that kind of landed there and kind of built up that neighborhood that's now known as a dining and entertainment district. And you're known for seafood with a Pacific Rim kind of spin to it. You ship in fresh fish from around the world.
Yeah. Often get people in from out of town who question, how can you call yourself a fresh seafood restaurant and you're so far inland? And I like to remind them that FedEx is 15 minutes away from Tsunami. So, for instance, when I was still getting seafood from Hawaii, I talked to the seller in Hawaii on Monday, and he'd tell me what was coming in off the boat that day. And I'd place an order, and it would be at my door Wednesday morning. So off the boat Monday to my building Wednesday morning.
That's pretty fresh. You can't get any fresher than that. And most of the time, too, you were ordering, and you still do, you order whole fish and you butcher it yourself, correct?
Whenever I can, I like to get whole fish because I like to control the portion size. And yeah.
That's a commitment and obviously a love of all things seafood.
Yeah, it's a handful.
So food cost, that's a term that people hear. And if you're not in the restaurant world, you may not know what that is. Can you give us like a brief 101 definition of what food cost is?
Food cost, simply put, is the amount of money you spend on food. Now, in an ideal situation, a restaurant like mine, you want to shoot for a certain food cost percent. So food cost percent would be the amount of money you spend out of each dollar to put that food on a plate. So ideal food cost for us is around 30%.
And that's higher because it's a little bit, 30% would be higher for more like a finer dining restaurant. For example, something that is a very casual, fast casual concept, theirs may be slightly lower.
Yeah, quite a bit lower. So we've always shot for 30% or lower. So that means basically we spend, for every dollar we spend on a dish, 30 cents of it is cost.
It's just the ingredients.
Just the ingredients.
So everybody listen to that because we're going to get into that. And then we're going to talk about what else goes into the cost of the dish for a minute. But
that's important because a lot of people will look, just go to the grocery and say, oh, well, sea bass at the grocery is, X amount of dollars and you're selling it for way more than that. So yeah, there are a lot of factors that go into a dish, the cost of a dish.
You have a dish that has been on a menu, I think since day one, the roasted sea bass over black Thai rice with a soy beurre blanc sauce.
Yes.
And that is your signature dish. I know you cannot take it off the menu, and I am partially to blame because it is probably one of my favorite fish dishes in the city of Memphis and has been for years.
Thank you.
I order it on a regular basis, and I know you're so creative. Thank goodness you have your small plate so you can flex those creative muscles, but still keep this favorite dish on the menu. But it's one of those things, the cost of it over the years has gone up and up and up. What is the current cost of this dish?
The menu price is $47 right now.
That's on the higher end of what you would find on a menu here in Memphis.
Yeah.
But I splurge because I feel it is worth every penny of it because it is so delicious. But we kind of talked earlier about, and I would love for you to do this for everyone listening, about what goes into the cost of that dish so people who could hear this can understand and know why it has a $47 price point.
Okay. Let's do some real simple culinary math here. So right now I'm paying $27.45 for sea bass. So based on recent delivery, got 16.62 pounds of sea bass in at $27.45, comes out to $456.22. So that's whole fillet, basically a whole side of a fish, because it's hard to get a whole sea bass in because they're massive, and it's more sea bass than I need. So I get a side, but I have to cut it down. There's some bones in it, there's skin, and by the time I trim it all out and portion it all out of that 16.6 pounds, I was left with 12 pounds of what's called edible portion. That 12 pounds still cost me $456.22, but instead of being $27.45 now, it's $38.02. So the price per pound skyrocketed a little bit. So if I take that $32 a pound divided by 16 ounces and multiplied by 8 ounces, my portion size comes out to $19. So it cost me $19 just to put that sea bass on a plate.
And that's not cooked?
That's not
no
cooked.
Sauce.
No sauce. No
black tie
rice.
of rice.
That's just putting the sea bass on the plate. So if I were to do a food cost analysis on that, where you take the cost divided by the selling price, that gives you your percentage. So if I take $19, this is just for the sea bass, again, just for the sea bass, not for the rice or the sauce. $19 divided by $47, that's a 40% food cost.
Wow.
That's 10 points above ideal food cost. Now, again, that's just for the protein, and it doesn't factor in the butter that goes into the sauce, which is almost $4 a pound now. The black tie rice, which has gone tripled in price, well, quadrupled in price since I first started buying it. And all the other factors that people don't consider behind the dish, the labor, the rent of the building, insurance, everything associated with running a business right now has skyrocketed.
That's a really sobering fact and really hits home when you look at why something is so expensive. And that's something that I really wanted people to understand, and why I wanted to have you on, because I knew some of this. But when you hear it like that, that's striking, because if you're running on such a slim margin of how your profitability for your business as a whole, when you have a dish like that is, I'm sure you sell a heck of a lot of them every night, because everyone loves it so much. It's hard, one, to justify keeping it on the menu. And it's kind of putting you in a bad position financially, because you're selling this dish that you're really not making any money off of. When one looks at a dish like that has such a high food cost, how does a restaurateur, do you balance that out over the whole menu? How does that kind of work?
The sea bass is what we call a loss leader in the industry, meaning it's a dish that you're not making money on, or you're actually losing money on, but it draws people in. So the sea bass is my signature dish. It gets people in the door for either repeat business, or they come in because they've heard about the sea bass. They want to try it themselves. So you have a hook. You get people in the door with your loss leader, but then they're going to get an appetizer. They're going to get a salad. Another member of the party is going to get something else. So you try to shoot for that ideal food cost percent, not in each individual dish, but overall. So with appetizers, with other dishes, with low-cost food items that you can notch the profit margin up on a little bit, hopefully you can balance it all out. Also, another reason why I get whole fish is because I control the portion size. but then I have little bits and pieces left over. You always want to somehow utilize trim or whatever little odds and ends you get from your proteins, turn it into another dish. So, for instance, all the trim I have from every fish I cut, we'll take those bits, dice them up, toss them in a seasoning, saute them, and that goes into our fish taco of the day. So the taco is a great dish because it has every fish that I cut that day in it. But it's a way to utilize all that trim and make some money off of it. So you're not losing that product, and you have virtually a low-cost food item that you can sell for higher profit margin and hopefully maintain an overall balance in the menu.
That's a lot to think about.
And you sell a lot of cocktails too.
Thank goodness
Real
that there is a good margin in alcohol.
Yeah, so sell a lot of drinks.
You're listening to the Daily Memphian Soundbites with me, Jennifer Chandler. And today we're talking with Tsunami owner Ben Smith about restaurants and menu pricing. If you're tuning in on WYXR, keep listening for the sidebar with Eric Barnes after this. If you're listening through your podcast app, be sure to subscribe. You can also find our other Daily Memphian podcasts, The Sidebar with Eric Barnes about art, culture, and more, Grizzlies Pod with Drew Hill and Chris Harrington, Behind the Headlines Podcast Edition, On the Record, an occasional political podcast with Daily Memphian legend Bill Dries. So Ben, when you think about a food cost, prices over the past 4 years, like how much have you seen the price of, commodity ingredients like your fish or rice or butter? Like what's the percentage that you've seen it increase?
Oh my God, Jennifer. I've seen in some instances price of things double in the course of a week. Just the oddest things, fresh herbs, fluctuate crazily. And it seems like every week, if one thing goes down, something else goes up. There's no consistency, and there's no really rhyme or reason I can see in how these prices are fluctuating. So mostly they're going up. Occasionally prices will go down. Commodities like beef, chicken, dairy, they kind of fluctuate a lot. But we're paying prices for commodities that I haven't seen in 26 years.
Has it always been this volatile, or is this something that's new since 2020?
Commodities always fluctuate, and a lot of factors go into that. Weather, labor cost, any number of factors. You have a wildfire, you have drought, you have unseasonable rainy weather in agricultural areas. All that can affect produce prices. But I've never seen it on this level. And I think usually when prices go up, there's a cycle. They go back down, and over the course of a year, just like you try to balance your food costs over your whole menu, you hope during the course of a year that your profit margins fluctuate in such a way that it maintains a consistent balance over the course of a year. Hadn't really been the case these past 4 years. It's just costs keep going up and profit margins keep going down. It's a concern.
Well, without a doubt, I think it's a concern for everyone that they're concerned about inflation, about where they're spending their dollar. But one of the things that we talked about a second ago was just the fact that independently owned restaurants are what give a community, I call it their soul, their personality. It's what makes a place special. And my fear is that when I hear stories from restaurateurs like yours about what's going on in the industry right now, that we might be losing some of these places.
Yeah. Restaurants, coffee shops, even barbershops, independently owned barbershops, or what sociologists call that third place or the third space, a space that's not home and it's not work, but it's a place where people come together and interact with each other. And it's done in a different manner, different way than work or home. And it's a real important part of American culture, any culture, that third space where people interact on more of a social level. And if we lose that, and I see these trends of food delivery and people staying home and not eating out as much and supporting corporate coffee shops. And, it worries me that we're going from a society where you go into a coffee shop and where people know your name. And now it's, you go into a coffee shop and they have to ask your name and write it on the cup. And it just seems so impersonal and so, unsocial and so not good. Yeah. And I'd hate to see that happen with restaurants. It's one of the last few third places where people come together and socialize and engage and interact with each other. And if that is lost and we all become a nation of corporate restaurants, then that's going to have a negative impact on our society, I think.
Oh, I agree with you. And what's scary to me too is you see corporate restaurants are closing now as well.
Yeah.
That almost seems like end of time stuff.
That should be a really big red flag when corporate restaurants are pulling the plug. That just goes to show the dire sort of situation we're in now.
One of the things we touched on earlier, and we really didn't get into it because we were talking about the cost of ingredients that are actually on the plate. But what are some of the other things that go into the cost of doing business that impact your bottom line? What are some of those other things that your restaurant patron may not think about when they're sitting there and looking at the menus and what the costs are that they're going to spend? What's behind all that?
Well, obviously, labor is huge now. Rent is huge. Insurance is ridiculous. Liability insurance, insurance on building, workman's compensation insurance, linen costs, tablecloths, grill towels, napkins, beverage service, coffee, tea, iced tea, coffee is more expensive. Maintenance and repairs. We rent our dishwasher, our ice machine, our coffee maker, just on and on and on. The to-go boxes, another big expense that was never a factor for us before. We never did much takeout before COVID. And now we're doing significant amount of takeout on a regular basis, and takeout boxes are expensive. So all the little things like that would go on a plate before, like I'll do dishes, specials with, 2 different sauces or a salsa and a different sauce. And we have to have separate containers for all of these because I don't want to just put everything in a to-go box and send it on its merry way. So just the cost of putting food in a to-go box is a hidden expense that we never saw before.
And all those little things add up.
All those little things add up.
Pretty quickly, it sounds like.
Latex gloves. We're using way more latex gloves than we did before. They're, what cost them out the other day? They're a nickel a piece. A nickel a piece. That doesn't sound like much, but when you're going through a box of 100 every shift, it adds up.
Yeah.
Over the course of a year or a month. Little things like I just had to replace a whole air conditioner unit in my restaurant.
That's not a little thing.
That's not a little thing.
That's a big expense.
No, that was $12,000. And that's a catch-22 because we haven't been able to seat people in that south dining room for 2 weeks because of the AC. So
then you've got a loss of business because
loss
the
of
AC is
business,
out and you're having to spend all this money to get that
Yeah.
in there. And there was probably a delay on getting the equipment in.
Yeah.
I feel like that happens to me anytime anything breaks in my own home. So I can only imagine, I'm sure commercial equipment is even harder to get by, to get
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, so I got to sell a whole lot of sea bass coming up.
Ben, is there one thing that you would want our listeners today that are listening to this conversation to keep in mind when they're dining out anywhere, making their choices of where to go? Is there something you'd want to say to them to think about when they're dining out, to kind of, especially when it comes to menu prices and things along those lines?
There's a lot I'd like to say to the public.
Can you? Yes.
But I'm going to
we can talk for hours.
Let me just say
we'll have you back on, Ben.
Yes. This could be a whole series. What I will say is that restaurants are kind of the front line of this whole cost of goods trickle down sort of thing. And we're the front line. We're the ones that get the most pushback and the most, why does this cost so much sort of dialogue. And we don't have much recourse. If we want to keep doing what we do, and we do, we have to keep pace with these price increases. And that means menu increases, because we're not going to compromise quality. We're not going to compromise the income of our employees, but we have to keep pace with these increases. We keep hoping that there's going to be a downward trend and something's going to break and things are going to go back to the better days. But right now, all I can say is know that we're doing all we can to stay in business and stay creative and stay consistent with quality and creativity. Also, the people that are working in this business have been through so much these past 4 years. People in the front of the house have been, again, at the front line of a lot of pushback and a lot of questioning and a lot of negativity. And I work with some of the hardest working, most motivated, most resilient people I've ever known in this industry. And we want people to understand that our jobs are real jobs. We're not doing this to work our way through college. We're not doing this to supplement another income. We're not doing this because we're waiting for the next good thing to come along. This is what we do. This is our career. And that goes for the front of the house, the bartenders, the servers, the food runners, the hostesses. This is what we do. And I think we would all like to see a little bit more understanding and supportive of the fact that this is a serious job and we take it seriously.
Thank you, Ben. I'm grateful you were willing to come on and have a frank and honest conversation about what's going on in the restaurants right now. And to everyone listening, please, this week, consider dining out at one of your favorite small, independent-owned Memphis restaurants.
Thanks, Jennifer.